Welcome back. This is John Locke, and a lot of people are talking about this, and some of my viewers have asked me to talk about this, so we're going to talk about the Birt update in Google. B-E-R-T. This blog post here just dropped a few days ago. Understanding search is better than ever before. So let's look at what this actually is. Will it impact you? My own personal thoughts on this. So this person, Pandu Nayak, starts by saying, one thing that he's learned over 15 years of working on Google search, people's curiosity is endless. Google sees billions of searches per day. 15% of those search queries are ones that Google has never seen before. So they need systems to be able to return results for queries that they haven't seen and they can't anticipate. So he says, when people like you or I come to search, we are not always quite sure about the best way to formulate a query, like what you're typing in to find what you want to find. And he says, we might not know the right words to use or how to spell something because oftentimes we come to search looking to learn and we don't necessarily have the knowledge to begin with. And at its core, search is about understanding language. So it's Google's job to figure out what you're searching for and surface helpful information from the web, no matter how you spell or combine the words in your query. While we've continued to improve our language understanding capabilities over the year, we sometimes still don't get it quite right, particularly with complex or conversational queries. In fact, that's one of the reasons why people often use keywordese, typing strings of words together that they think that Google will understand, but it's not how you would normally ask a question if you're, talking out loud. So, with the latest advancements from the Google research team and in the science of language understanding made possible by machine learning, Google is making a significant improvement to how they understand queries, representing the biggest leap forward in the past 5 years and one of the biggest leaps forward in the history of search. It's everything's always big, but I do for reasons that we'll talk about in a minute. I do think this is a big thing, but this is something that is not new. It's something that they've been working on for at least a year. So let's talk about this. So in this section, he's saying, applying Birt models to search. Last year, we introduced and open-sourced a neural network-based technique for natural language processing. So a neural net is basically like how your brain works. Okay, so the natural language part, we did do a video on this very recently. This is not Birt, but this is related to it. And they have been working on this for a while, trying to understand how things connect. I'll link a card up here, but basically, like the syntax part of it is, this illustrates a little bit of what Birt is doing, of trying to understand the syntax of sentences or the syntax of search queries. And they'll talk more about this, but like I said, you can see more of this on the natural language page. I'll link up the other video that we did. But the engineer says, last year we introduced this, neural-based network with natural language processing, and the pre-training called Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers, so Bert. The joke here is this is based on another acronym type of thing that they did before called Elmo. Anyway, it doesn't super matter. You don't really need to understand the nuts and bolts of every single thing about that, but the technology enables anyone to train their own state-of-the-art question answering system. And the result of this was, or the breakthrough, I should say, was the result of Google research on transformers, which are models that process words in relation to all the other words in a sentence. So if you have sets of words, if you add different types of words, it changes the context of the sentence, basically. So, adding a modifying word to a sentence, it changes the context of the entire sentence. So rather than one by one in order, and language is like that. There's lots of words that have duplicitous or a myriad of meanings. They mean different things. English is especially notorious for that, where different words have multiple meanings. So BERT models can therefore consider the full context of a word by looking at the words that come before and after it, particularly useful for understanding the intent behind search queries. It's not just advancements in software that make this possible, they needed new hardware too. So some of the models that they can build with BERT are so complex that they push the limits of what they could do using that old traditional hardware. So for the first time, Google is using the latest cloud TPUs to serve search results and give you more relevant information quickly. What are cloud TPUs? Essentially, they're basically the high-level processing units. This AI, artificial intelligence infrastructure that they need to do this type of machine learning. These are the latest generation of supercomputers Google has built specifically for machine learning. So basically, they're saying that they've built supercomputers just to try and build up this AI that they're using for search and BERT. So that's basically what this means. Okay. So that said, he said, there's a lot of technical details. What does it all mean for you? By applying BERT models to both ranking and featured snippets in search, and remember, we're talking about BERT basically being understanding the context of sentences by using modifying words in understanding the context of the sentence as a whole, and not just looking at isolated keywords. It helps you do a better job of finding your useful information. When it comes to ranking results, BERT will help search better understand 1 in 10 queries in the US, so that's 10%, and will bring this to more languages and locales over time. So for right now, what they're saying is it's US results in English, and they will roll it out to more areas in the planet and more languages over time, but the US and English is what they're starting with, presumably because the majority of Google engineers, that's their native language. So for more conversational queries or searches where prepositions like for and to matter a lot to the meaning, search will be able to understand the context of these words in your query, and you can search in a way that feels more natural for you. So they did a lot of testing to ensure that the changes actually are more helpful. Of course, they're just announcing it now. Anytime that they announce something, it means that they have been testing it for a while. And in fact, these core updates that roll out about every 3 to 4 months are basically the quarter or maybe the 2 quarters before then. They've been doing testing in isolation, A/B testing to test their theories. Not everybody sees the same search results because they're doing testing all the time to make sure that people are satisfied with what they're seeing and measuring user signals once they get to those pages. Once they're confident that they have these smaller pieces of the algorithm dialed in, then they roll it into the main algorithm. That's when you see these big core updates and these big announcements. It's just the culmination of testing that they've been doing behind the scenes. And like I said, they first announced that they were doing testing with this BERT thing, bidirectional encoder, something transformers, like a year ago. So this has actually been in the works for a year. So they give some examples here. Search for 2019 Brazil traveler to USA needs a visa. So the big keyword here meaning a traveler from Brazil to the USA before they would show a result where it's U.S. citizens traveling to Brazil because they didn't understand, oh, Brazil traveler to the USA needs a visa. Now, They show the U.S. Embassy for Brazil, a page about visas. So they understand a little bit better. In this case, this example, somebody's traveling from Brazil to the USA, not the other way around. So this is another example they show. Do aestheticians stand a lot at work? No question mark here, but before they're showing this result, it's medical aesthetician versus a medical spa aesthetician. And you see this word works. The type of business in which an aesthetician works can have an impact on their earnings. And then now the result is aestheticians, physical demands, and it shows kind of the physical, what do you call it, like requirements of the job for the different ones. So that's all that really means. It's understanding the full context of the sentences a little bit better. And again, if you go back to this natural language thing, and again, one of the tabs here is basically showing how they actually are learning how to break down a whole sentence and understand the meaning. So these little arrows, this is the bidirectional part. Two-way, bidirectional, understanding the relationship of words to each other in the sentence based on what comes before and what comes after. Bidirectional encoding. Transformers would be these words like the preposition or other things that change the context of the sentence. So that's basically what this is. All right, so basically they're saying, okay, here's the last little part. We're applying Birt to make search better for people across the world. So we're taking models that they learned from improvements in English and applying them to other languages. For featured snippets, we're using a Birt model to improve featured snippets in the 24 countries where this feature is available, and we're already seeing significant improvements in languages like Korean, Hindi, and Portuguese. So this is just telling you before that featured snippets in these languages probably wasn't that good, but now it's improving. Search is not a solved problem. So no matter what you're looking for or what language you speak, we hope that you're able to let go some of your keywordese and search in a way that feels natural for you. They conclude by saying you'll still stump Google from time to time, even with Birt. We don't always get it right, and if you search for which state is south of Nebraska, Birt's best guess is a community called South Nebraska. If you have got a feeling it's not in Kansas, you're right. So language understanding remains an ongoing challenge, and it keeps us motivated to improve search. So anyway, let's Google this right now. What state is south of Nebraska? Let's find out. Let's see what's actually going on. So it says Nebraska. What state is directly south of Nebraska? People also ask. You know, this might be a clue too. So according to Bert, that's what it is. So, but that's not what's in the actual search result. Isn't that interesting? Normally, you see like those things up at the top where it just gives you the answer. And it just says what state is below Nebraska. I actually have to look this up. I don't know. Oh, it's Kansas, right? So normally there'd be like an answer box here if it truly understood that. But again, that's not in the actual search results. So lastly, this article from Search Engine Roundtable basically summarizing this. You know, I hate when they name all these different things, but I understand why they do it. But summarizing the same thing, you know, it's rolling out everywhere now that they've done testing. They've been working on it for a year. They've tested it. Now they're rolling it out and announcing it. It impacts the featured snippets. We talked about that in the foreign languages. It means that, okay, this is them saying the fluctuations we saw this week, last week, who knows? You know, and this says like fluctuations. Whenever Google announces an algorithm, people always say like, hey, if I lost ranking, that means it was algorithm change. That's not always the case, so don't jump to that conclusion. Um, basically 10% of queries are going to be changed, but that means 90% of queries are not going to be changed. So 90% of all search queries are not going to be affected by this. It's only 10%. That's basically it. It doesn't replace RankBrain. It doesn't replace any other machine learning things. It just works in conjunction with them. And again, you can't optimize for it or anything like that. It's just interpreting how we talk in a natural way and how we write, how we speak, and understanding it a little bit better. All right, so the neural matching that was talked about in March. Google summed it up. RankBrain helps Google better relate pages to concepts. Neural matching helps Google better relate words to searches. Again, this is the thing right here with the bidirectional encoding with transforming words. Bidirectional understanding the sentence as a whole. So neural matching is specifically here like what you think of when you think of when people talk about when they talk about the LSI keywords. This is basically what they actually mean. This is the actual term that people are searching for, and so neural matching helps them relate words to searches. It's an artificial intelligence-based system Google began using in 2018, same time that they started Bert, primarily to understand how words are related to concepts. It's like a super synonym system. And synonyms being words that are closely related to other words. But neural matching helps Google understand that a search for "why does my TV look strange" is related to the concept of the soap opera effect, even though you're not using those words. We can then return pages about the soap opera effect, even if the exact words are not being used. So, soap opera effect, consumer lingo for a visual effect called by motion interpolation, a process that high-definition televisions use to display content at a higher refresh rate than the original source. The goal of motion interpolation is to give the viewer a more lifelike picture. But if you Google, "why does my TV look strange?" Google, the neural matching knows after time that it means this. So Bert is not neural matching. They are all related. Natural language, Bert, bidirectional encoding representations from transformers, RankBrain, they're all related. They're not the same, but they're all basically moving Google toward the goal of being able to understand natural language and how we type things out and how we search for things in a way that's more natural. All right. My name's John Locke. My business is Lockdown Design and SEO. I'm here every single day making videos on SEO. If you have a question that you would like to see answered, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. Of course, I reply to every single comment I get. That's it for now, and I will be here tomorrow. Until next time, peace.